What's up everyone, it's Bruce with WAHA. Hope y'all are having a good day. Today's episode of Wingman Wednesday, we're going to be talking about the top 5 UCMJ articles that you should know about. Now there's a lot of different articles in the UCMJ that would be beneficial for everyone to know, but these would be the top 5 that you should definitely concentrate on and familiarize yourself with, because not knowing this information could jeopardize your career in many ways. But before we get started, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you like what we're doing here at WAHA at Heart. Alright, let's get into it. And you may be asking yourself, Gonzo, how did you come up with this list? Well, it's really easy. I contacted one of my wingmen over at the JAG office and I asked him, hey, what are the top 5 UCMJ articles that airmen should really know about once joining the military? He immediately told me, hey, this is the list that all airmen should know about because these are the most common violated UCMJ articles. So this short, brief education on the UCMJ articles isn't just for airmen, but also for anyone that's going to be involved in the military lifestyle. Now that includes spouses, family members, as well as civilians that are going to be working in a military environment. So which article are we first going to be getting into? Now that's Article 92. That's failure to obey a general order. If you are a service member of the United States Armed Forces and have failed to obey a general order or regulation issued by a military department or a commanding officer, you will be subject to be charged under Article 92 of the UCMJ. So what does that mean exactly? If you violate or fail to obey a lawful general order or regulation or dereliction in the performance of those duties, if you receive an order, you must obey the order as long as the order is lawful, ethical, and moral. If that order meets all of that criteria, well then it's not a matter of your opinion, it's an order. So if you find yourself on the less than ideal side of an Article 92, the following information is possibly what your punishment could entail. Dishonorably discharged from the military, ending your military career and threatening your civilian career with a tarnishable reputation. All pay and benefits may be forfeited. Your health care, your pension, your paycheck, all of it might be taken away. Now the next article that we're going to talk about is Article 83. That's feigning an illness, injury, or inflicting harm upon oneself. Any service member of the United States Armed Forces who attempts to shirk his or her duties by either feigning an illness, injury, or inflicting harm upon himself or herself may face charges for malingering under the UCMJ. So what does that mean exactly? That the accused feigned illness, physical disablement, mental lapse or derangement, or intentionally inflicted injury upon themselves, and that the accused's purpose or intent in doing so was to avoid work, duty, or service. So what does that mean that the punishment would be if you found yourself on the opposite side of this article? A dishonorable discharge, along with the loss of your health care, military retirement, and paycheck. A prison sentence that could leave you behind bars for up to 10 years under the maximum possible sentence. A severely handicapped civilian future where your opportunities will be scarce and your ability to rise to the top will be very limited. So you're kind of starting to see the trend. A lot of the people that end up being discharged or going to court violating the UCMJ, a lot of these articles are common things in the military. Thus, the reason we decided to make an episode on Wingman Wednesday about the UCMJ. Next article, Article 88, using contemptuous language against a government official. Article 88 of the UCMJ makes it a criminal offense for a commissioned officer to use contemptuous language against a government official, elected or not. So what does that mean exactly? Well, military protocol dictates that officers conduct themselves properly in front of government officials. A breach of this protocol can jeopardize the military's reputation and standing as an unbiased, non-political entity. Because of this, sentencing for Article 88 can be extremely harsh. Now I know what you're thinking. Gonzo, that's it, officers. It didn't say anything about being enlisted. Now I thought the same thing. But to get your answer, you're gonna have to check out our episode of The Exchange where we talked about the UCMJ with a JAG Airman. But if you find yourself on the opposite end of this article, the following information could possibly be the punishment that airman might face. You may face dismissal as a commissioned officer. Even if you do avoid being discharged from the military, your advancement will almost surely grind to a halt. You may face imprisonment for up to a year, along with forfeiture of all pay. You may put your family at risk for extreme debt as well. Your civilian reputation could be impacted by a prison sentence and a dismissal, the officer equivalent of a dishonorable discharge. Now the following article, I know for a fact everyone has heard about, especially early on in your career joining any military branch. Now that is Article 104, Fraudulent Enlistment. Should a service member of the U.S. Armed Forces be accused by deceiving the government by deliberately concealing or misrepresenting information related to your military enlistment, appointment, or separation, you may be charged with a crime under Article 104A of the UCMJ. What does that mean exactly? Well, simply put, if you lie or give misinformation during your enlistment process or your enlistment application, you can be charged under Article 104. But what's the punishment? Any pay you may have received from enlistment or appointment to a new position will require its immediate return. Your family may be forced to pay off your debts. You may be punitively discharged from the military for the rest of your life. You will be forced to hide your previous service from employers and acquaintances. You could face anywhere from a maximum sentence of 2 to 5 years in prison should you be convicted. Now, does that happen? Yeah, sadly it does. That's why we decided to do an episode regarding the UCMJ here on Wingman Wednesday, to hopefully educate our airmen and potential airmen on the UCMJ and the things that they should pay attention to, get a handle on, and have a full grasp knowledge on these specific articles.
And finally, Article 12, Drunk while on duty.
Any service member of the United States Armed Forces who are found drunk while performing in duty, other than acting as a lookout or sentinel, will be accused of drunkenness on duty under the Article 12 of the UCMJ. Now, what many people could consider this to be a victimless crime is notorious for ending careers and halting careers that were on an upward projection. So basically, don't be drunk at work. There are a lot of AFSCs that have rules that say you cannot drink so many hours prior to the start of your duty day. What's the punishment? Well, you could be sentenced to prison for almost a year for something as simple as getting drunk the night before and performing your duties while still slightly under the influence the next duty day. You may be forced out of the military with a punitive discharge. You'll be forced to hide your military history from future employers and acquaintances, retirement and healthcare. All of your benefits and all of your pay will be taken from you, as well as years of service to your country for potentially a bad decision which left you with nothing. Now, if you have any questions regarding the articles that we discussed here on this episode today, be sure to leave that out in the comments below. And now we're going to connect with one of my wingmen over on The Exchange, who is a subject matter expert on the UCMJ. What's up, guys? It's Bruce from WAHA. Hope y'all are having a good day. Today's episode, we're talking to a paralegal for the Air Force. That is my boy, Duke. And he's a 5J0X1. Now, his name's not really Duke, but that's what we called him in BMT. That's where we met. So, what's going on, bro?
Nothing much, man. How you doing?
Doing all right, man. It's getting cold here in Germany, and I see it's super sunny and cloudy skies over there for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Alabama. It's great. I still pulling things off my tomato plants. It's fantastic. It's
Oh
great.
man, that's jealous. That's jealous. I get a lot of pictures and stuff from people back home in Texas and all over the place, and I haven't seen the sun in like a month, and it's gonna be about 3 more months of that. So we'll see how it is over here. So you started teaching at the paralegal as a paralegal instructor over for the Air Force for how long now?
So I've been teaching for almost a year now.
Oh yeah, how do you enjoy it?
It's it's a lot of fun, without a doubt. I mean, we get to teach both the paralegals, and then we team with the attorneys and get to teach some of our brand new JAGs. We call them baby JAGs a lot of the time. Teaching them and kind of working them through different issues uh, from a legal standpoint, and also just from, hey, how do you operate in the Air Force? I mean, we learn a lot in basic, but there's still so much more that they need to get, and what to expect whenever they get out to the real world, to the real Air Force, as we like to call it.
I see. Yeah, 100%. There is a whole lot of differential, whenever you're going as a trainee to whatever your tech school is. And then, they always tell you when you get into the rear Air Force, it's going to be a whole different thing. And they're not lying. They're definitely not lying whenever you get out there and you see the way things run. You always feel that perhaps things could be run a little bit better, but you do get appreciation for where it's at. And that is a big thing with the new culture in the Air Force is there is, a serious push to be able to get, technology involved, be able to, adapt to the new system and, progress, make it easier. I think airmen now, that more than they used to be, was, they want you to do more with less. And now the airmen have pretty much taken it upon themselves to be able to kind of push that forward. And one way you guys are doing that is doing the online videos and courses, right?
Yeah, we've got a few online courses that we're doing for a lot of our curriculum and a lot of our staff, uh, and just across the Air Force and the JAG Corps as a whole. A few different courses as a result of primarily COVID has been a big motivator, but it's been a good thing as well because it's forced us to embrace technology a little bit more, which has been a fantastic thing, I think, and something that is positive that's going to come out of this entire situation.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Being able to see, and more so, big Air Force being able to see and be like, hey, we don't need all these people here at one time. We can kind of rotate them. They can work from home. The upper leadership, that fall into that category where they're, getting on age and they're a little bit more in that bracket that's a little more susceptible to COVID. You guys can stay there. People come in at times and people can just operate, trust your NCOs and they run it pretty well. And everybody else just kind of, comes in whenever they need to. And they just kind of do meetings online. And I definitely dig it. I like the way they've been doing it. And it allows people to kind of breathe. Stress is a big thing, and that's one of the things that we handled and talked about in the last episode. Was stress is always been a big thing in the military, and with the introduction of COVID, it's gotten a lot more intense in specific situations, and there are a lot of unique new stresses, and so the Air Force has to adapt. The airmen have to adapt, and that's one thing that you're seeing across the board. But I don't know many instructors or many other schools that are kind of handling it the way y'all are. So I'm definitely very happy to hear that.
No, and without a doubt. I mean, you're talking about stressors and what have you, and I think this entire situation has been kind of advantageous when it comes to that thing. They always call it work-life balance, right? But there really is no balance. Sometimes work's going to be more important, and sometimes life is going to take the bulk of your time, whatever it may be. And it's just trying to balance those times out, not so much having 4 hours here, 4 hours there every single day. That's not realistic. It's not going to happen. But I think embracing technology a little bit and the distance aspect of being able to accomplish our missions. Mind you, some AFFCs have a little less flexibility, but I think it's a positive thing. I think a lot of people have benefited from that.
I definitely agree with that 100%. And whenever I was going through the UCMJ and I thought about, talking about this subject matter because there was an encounter that was done at one of the bases where
one of the airmen was caught in one of the articles. I'm not going to say which one. And the way that it came about, I didn't know that you could I did not realize that it was that one catch-all article, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't realize how specific or how general some of the articles are. And that one airman got caught up in it, and I had a conversation with him. He's separated from the military since then, honorably, so he was able to come off of that. So that was a good thing.
Helped him out.
But like having that conversation with him, I was like, I didn't know all of that prior to. So very first person I thought of was like, okay, well, who do I know that knows this stuff? And that was you. You're the first person. I'm like, I don't know anybody else in JAG, but I know one guy, and that's the only guy that I need to know. So I was like, okay, which are the top 5 articles that airmen should definitely know, once they get into the military, especially during their first term, because during your first term, you're learning so much. And a lot of the times you don't anticipate that your decisions are going to have the consequences that you end up encountering. And a lot of airmen don't see that or don't have the foresight to see that. And hopefully they have a good supervisor to keep them out of that. I was fortunate enough to, have good supervisors those first few years that kind of kept me out of trouble, because Lord knows one of the big things, and I don't know if I told you this, but I've told other people since then, I was like, my first term, that first contract, it was from the moment I got to boot camp to the moment that I re-enlisted, it was just getting humbled over and over and over and over. Because I mean, when I got to boot camp, I was not, a young kid. I had
I think you were one of the oldest ones in our flight.
I think I really was. And, I guess it came off that way. That's why I ended up getting the position that I did. After that, whenever I got to tech school, I was just like, you know what? I'm tired of this. This is childish. I'm so much more mature than this. Why I got to do this? Why I got to do that? And then I'd get humbled. And then I got to my first duty station and I got a good position. I was like, okay, cool. I'm like, oh, wait, you don't have enough stripes to talk like that. I got humbled. So that first term was it was a lot of, I think that's a thing for older airmen and airmen that naturally go into a leadership position because that's their personality is you push the envelope a little bit because you don't want to see, it's not necessarily you want to see how far you can get. You want to basically find your voice in those first few years. What kind of airman are you going to be? What kind of leader are you going to be? Are you going to be, one of those airmen that lead? Are you going to be one of those support airmen that help everyone, push them forward? And I mean, I said it, and it's probably not good advice. However, if I have a supervisor or an NCO that I'm looking up to and you ain't ever got an LOR, I'm not entirely sure if I can confide in you all the way through.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I definitely had some supervisors in my first couple of assignments who I was a little big for my britches, and they took the time to take me aside before it turned into a more prominent issue. But no, we were having this conversation the other day at work. Who here has paperwork and what is it for? And we were all talking about it. We weren't mad about it. I mean, it did what it was supposed to do. It made us open our eyes and go, okay, hold on, maybe I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and that's one thing that, like I said, older airmen are going to encounter, because when you come in as an older airman, you think about like, hey man, I've lived out there in the real world, where no one cares about you. And then you get here and you're just like, okay, oh, I know this, I know that. And then you get to the real Air Force and you're like, you don't know anything. That's it. Like life lessons is a completely different story. You don't know jack about being in the military. And that's one thing that was very humbling in the beginning, was that I just had to learn that. I'm like, okay, yeah, don't say nothing. You're wrong. Even if you're right, just listen, see how you can adapt and, learn from this. And definitely going over the UCMJ and the articles that you brought up is one way that we can probably set a lot of airmen, at least on
A better path.
on a better path and a lot more knowledgeable on the type of world that they're going to get into.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the exchange here on Wingman Wednesday. Just a quick reminder, if you hadn't subscribed to the channel, be sure to do so and like this video. Without further ado, back to the exchange.
Yeah.
So failure to obey a general order. Like we went over the discussion in the episode, and as long as it's moral, ethical, and legal, I mean that's pretty much it, right?
For the most part, yeah. So that's Article 92 of the UCMJ, and a little bit of background about the UCMJ. So the UCMJ comes from the United States Code. It's out of Title 10. It is Title 10, United States Code, subsection 800 through 939 is where it comes from. And being the United States Code, that means Congress writes it. So it's not an Air Force member who is writing this. This isn't any member of the DoD who's writing it. Sure, we provide feedback, but at the end of the day, Congress is writing this and passing it and making these different changes and making up these rules. So that's where these rules come from. And so if you're ever looking at them and you think, hey, there's a little bit of a disconnect here between what really happens and what's in there, it takes a while to get things through Congress and to get changed and to get updated, as you'll see as we kind of go through some of these. So Article 92, of course, violating general order, it includes a lot of stuff beyond that, violating a regulation or just general dereliction of duty. So it includes a ton of different things. General orders, I think of that, my best example is always deployment related, because if you've ever deployed and any of the new airmen who are coming in or interested in coming in, they're viewing this, you're going to deploy. It's a great experience. Have a good time, without a doubt. You make a lot of great friends. But one of the downsides is there's a lot of rules as well. As long as you play with those rules, you're good. But you've got normally General Order 1, and it has a couple of different subsets depending on what country you're in, A, B, C, etc., that have different rules that apply to them. And some of them seem crazy, right? And maybe a little excessive. Yeah. And of course, there's primarily a lot of the countries we're in, they're very conservative Muslim countries. So they have a lot of prohibitions against alcohol, for one. Some countries you just can't drink in. You may think it's silly. You can't do that. I've worked at the ADC office for a while. That's the Area Defense Council. We defend airmen who are in trouble. I did that. I did 2 stints of that, one in California, one while deployed. During that time, I had over 1,000 clients. So I got to see a lot of less than great decisions. And it doesn't mean these guys are bad guys by any means. There are very few in the military who are just, no kidding, bad guys. Normally it's a bad decision, a poor decision. Something that could have been better. But we had a guy who decided he was going to try to make his own booze, like he was Hawkeye from MASH. Not a good idea. You can't do that. So you'll get in a lot of trouble for that.
That's super impressive.
Yeah, he tried to say they were smoothies when he got caught. Not a good idea.
Yeah, that's crazy. Being overseas, I mean, I was in Korea and now I'm in Germany. And yeah, General Order 1 is the thing that you hear the most about. Something in Korea, if you got General Order 1, that means it's something, was something big was going to happen. It was going to be an exercise, or there was some kind of static situation that might be developing, and they needed everybody to be, sober and on base, or, wherever you're supposed to be. If you ain't got to go out, don't go out, which kind of sounds like COVID lifestyle living now. But yeah, that's General Order 1 is the one that I'm most familiar with, just because I've heard it ever since leaving the States. I've heard it pretty much at every base I've ever visited.
Yeah. And then the other thing is regulations to include our AFIs or even our DoD instructions. Disobeying those is a violation of Article 92. And you'll see in some of the AFIs when you look at them, there's always those first few paragraphs when you go in that most people skip right over because it's a bunch of housekeeping type items. One of those paragraphs normally has in it, violations of this constitute a violation of the UCMJ under Article 92. Some don't. So you may be thinking, okay, well, those aren't that big of a deal. Not so, because Article 92 also includes just dereliction of duty. And that's very simply put as, hey, you had a duty to do X, you didn't do it, you're in trouble. Now, the punishment for that is a little less than if you actually violate something that's blatant. but it's out there. It's still there. You got to play by all these different rules.
The thing about the articles and what a lot of NCOs, I know the NCOs that I've had and the supervisors that I've had, it's whenever you encounter one of those situations where you did something that you didn't mean to, for instance, you use the government travel card incorrectly,
Yeah,
you know.
that's a
So
common one. It is.
yeah, you use the government card, the travel card incorrectly, you're just like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. And well, usually you'll get like a slap on the wrist, you get an LOR, you get an LOC or something like that. But if you have a history of getting yourself into trouble, I just thought about the Article 92 could totally just fall right into that. So I'm like, okay, that's one of those situations where it's, to some people it's not a big deal, but when it comes to the UCMJ, you can totally fall into that, and before you know it, you end up in a courtroom.
Without a doubt. And that's one of the important things to remember, is that most of the things that you're seeing people get paperwork for or getting counseled for, they could, if their supervisor wanted to, I mean, they're most likely violating the UCMJ. It's very likely that they could be accused of that. And any offense, any of those offenses could find themselves in a court martial, however small they may be. Bear in mind that we have this thing called progressive discipline. You're supposed to go through these different steps.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain cases when we skip steps. You murder someone, we're not going to give you an LOC. We're going to skip a few steps and go to court. But otherwise, if you're 5 minutes late to work, we're not going to take you to court the first time. That's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And different supervisors have different policies on what kind of paperwork they give and what kind of counselings and breaks and things of that nature. And that's all up to the supervisor. That's empowering the supervisor. Those are good things that need to happen. But I've had a client, unfortunately, he was court-martialed for multitude of things. Unfortunately, he kept thumbing his nose at his commander. Not a good idea when you're already in trouble.
100%. Yeah.
So he kept getting things added to the charge sheet. And one of the things that was added was he was 5 minutes late to work. We got him off on all the other offenses, but he now has a federal conviction for being 5 minutes late to work.
Yeah, I completely understand. It's one of those things, just like, hey, yeah, if you it's super easy to have all those things compound where, in the civilian world, yeah, you might have just gotten fired, in the beginning from the start of it, depending on what the business is. But in the military, they're going to give you, time to correct yourself. But if you habitually keep, making those errors and purposely making those errors, all it is it's just a checklist. You're just racking up a checklist that in the end, whenever it gets to a point where, nope, that's it. And whoever makes that determination, I mean, you've already created a laundry list of things that it can throw at you. And just like you said, you might be able to get everything else taken care of, but that one thing, that you've done habitually forever will eventually and can just come up and bite you in the ass and just end it.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's a federal conviction. A lot of people, they have this idea that a court martial is not a real court. It's not a real conviction. It is. It is a federal conviction and carries with it all the punishments that a federal conviction would get outside of the military, to include restrictions on being able to vote, restrictions on gun ownership. Those different types of things are still involved. Restrictions on what type of financial aid you can get. All those things come along with that. It's a big deal.
Wow, that's those aren't things that I thought of. I'm like, when I think of like, Article 15, then I'm like, okay, that guy he really got into something. And I'm like, okay, yeah, he loses a lot of those things. But whenever you say that, an article, potentially any article could take any one of those things away from you. It's especially now with just ending the voting and then, gun laws the way that they are, all of that stuff, that's big on veterans whenever they get out, either by retirement or separation. That's something that they still feel a high connection to and a responsibility, because you've seen the effects of what people getting voted in. Whenever civilians vote for an individual, they don't necessarily see the extent of what those decisions may come. But you and I and other military personnel, we're directly affected by every single one of those things.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. So the punishment that's it's come through is typically you would just, get kicked out of the military. Potentially could, depending on what the issue is under Article 92, see some jail time. Is that right?
Yeah, without a doubt, and it's really going to depend on how egregious the misconduct was. You know, what did you disobey, and what was the fallout from that?
I see. Yeah.
Are there other misconduct involved with it, and what is your track record? I mean, if it's a first-time thing and it's not that big of a, I say not that big of a deal. Every offense is a big deal, but it doesn't have that severe repercussion or some sort of severe effect on the unit. It may just be a simple piece of paperwork and you go on about your business. If it's a little more severe, or it's repeated misconduct, maybe you get an Article 15. And Article 15, in and of itself, is not a punitive article. Punitive articles are those articles that actually are criminal offenses. Those are mainly the ones we're going to talk about now. Article 15 is a process, and we kind of use the term very loosely, but it's an adverse administrative action. So it doesn't count as a conviction, and it's a process in which a commander can directly impose punishment. The real name is called non-judicial punishment. Non-judicial meaning there's no judge or jury. The commander is the fact finder.
Yeah, I hear that one.
In that regard. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, when I was reading into it, one of the things is just like you already mentioned it, was, being able to take your pay, benefits, and your health care. If you've had a lot of years in the military, your retirement paycheck, all of that can just be swiped up. And that was pretty surprising. I mean, I figured there was just gonna be like a fine, but they were like, no, they can literally just swipe all that up if it came down to it.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, and it goes the same with all these different offenses, right? It's all progressive, and so we start at the lower level, especially if it's lesser misconduct. We move up from there, and then if it's not so egregious, but the individual's just not working for the military and they just continuously getting in trouble, but it's not something so bad where we need to take them to court martial, we'll just discharge them, right? We'll kick them out of the military, normally for something like pattern of misconduct or minor disciplinary infractions. I mean, those are bases that we can use to discharge a member.
I see. Yeah, so, I mean, moving on to Article 83, feigning an illness, injury, or inflicting harm upon oneself. Like, how often does that really happen?
So how does it happen? Probably a ton. How often? That's a different issue. I mean, so this is, in layman's terms, this is malingering, right? That's really what this boils down to. Like, hey, I don't want to work. I don't want to deploy. I don't want to, whatever the case may be. I got this deployment coming up. I don't want to go. So I'm going to drop this case of beer on my foot and break it. Guess what? You don't have to deploy anymore. The difficult thing with this particular article is proving it. And I don't want to say that to encourage people to do these types of offenses. That's not at all what I'm saying. And I do want to add a quick caveat that, sorry, I was letting out my umbrellas. So sunny here. It's beautiful. Montgomery, Alabama.
I'm jealous. Yeah, I'm jealous, man.
The caveat with is that if you ever find yourself in any of these situations or you're accused of violating the UCMJ, do not rely on this video for how to get out of it. Go to the ADC. They will give you legal advice. This is purely informative. Every case needs to be looked at individually. So I want to make sure that's clear to everyone who is potentially viewing this. But so the hard thing to prove with malingering is that it has to be intentional. They have to prove that not only did you intentionally harm yourself, but you harmed yourself with the intent to avoid work, whatever work may have been. It was a deployment, maybe it was just work in general, whatever it may have been. Maybe you didn't want to go to training that day. I don't know. And it can be an actual injury, or you can just be feigning it. So pretending to be sick. So I don't have to go, if you're a security force member, don't have to go to training on your 1 day off a week. I know that's a gripe I've heard many, many times, and I feel for them, but that definitely sucks.
Like talking about this one, the very first thing that pops into my head is, whenever you show up for your PT test, how many people are feeling ill? Can you do this PT test? And, I mean, there are people that raise their hands and you're just like, he didn't look sick. I saw him like the other day. He seemed fine. And they're just like, oh, okay. Could that be one of those? Yes, could possibly be one of those. But it's one of those things that, just like you were saying, and yes, 100%. This is an informative video. This is just two airmen talking about, a specific subject matter. if you're coming to me for legal advice, you are wrong. You are absolutely wrong. I am not the guy. But yeah, I was trying to think of other examples that I've heard of that. And I mean, that's the first one that pops into my head. It's not something that I imagine a lot of people do, but at the same time, it's there for a reason. That
Yeah,
means someone did it.
probably happens more than we would like, but because it's so difficult to prove, it becomes an issue. And so what you'll see is a lot of times, if a commander or a supervisor or first sergeant truly believes this individual is doing this, but they don't have any proof that it was intentional,
Mhm.
and it's been a repeated conduct, sometimes they'll just get them under dereliction of duty. We're jumping back to that last article we talked about. Those like, oh, they're being derelict performance of their duties and not wanting to do their job. And no, I don't really believe they're sick. And then they put it back on the member to prove that they're sick or prove they have some sort of illness. But it's at least something for a supervisor to use if they are really, really upset about it and are not buying what the member is selling. And that's the thing, right? So there's two different types of offenses. You've got strict liability, you got more general liability. This offense is, you got to be able to show that they intended to commit the misconduct to hold them accountable for it. Whereas the last one we were talking about, violating an AFI or general order, that's strict liability. It's I'll compare it to the speed limit. It doesn't matter if you know the speed limit or not. If you're violating it, you're violating it, period. And that's the same way with AFIs and general orders. It doesn't matter if you've read every AFI. If you're violating it, you're violating it. End of story. It doesn't matter if you intended to or not.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And man, I remember the days being a civilian and calling into work. That was fine. But now it's like if you're feeling ill, it's like, all right, go to the clinic. I need a letter from the doc saying that you were sick. These were the symptoms you had. Blah 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 blah. And that's to cover yourself essentially.
Yeah.
Saying that, proving that, hey, yeah, I indeed was sick. This is what was going on. So I was asked by a civilian, what if you get sick? I was like, I still have to come in. I have to go to the clinic. I have to prove that I am what I say I am. And they're like, what if you don't? And I was like, well, and it was funny. It's like whenever you're talking to a civilian, the punishment that we generally give is just like, hey, if I say I'm sick and I'm not, I'll go to jail. Hey, if I don't show up for work, I'll go to jail. If I miss an appointment, I'll go to jail. Like,
it's always
yeah, we're being hyperbolic about it, but at the same time, it's one of those things. Just like potentially you could. It's one of those things, and they just look at it. They're like, no, you guys are playing. They're like, no, that's one of the things that we give up. And good on you for working here in the clinic with us, but it's a whole different set of rules for us than it is for y'all.
Yeah, we got that free health care, we got to go use it.
Yes, that's 100% true. I tell people that all the time. This next article, Article 88, contemptuous language against a government official. Now, the way that it reads is it says an officer. And I know that I'm just looking for a hole, I'm looking for a loophole, but I'm pretty sure it means all military personnel, but it says officer.
It means just officer. So there are two articles that I can go off the top of my head that are limited to just officers. There's this one here, Article 88, it's contempt. Really, it's just showing contempt toward public officials, and it lists out a few different ones, and we'll get into those. And then the other is Article 133, which is conduct unbecoming. And that is specifically for officers. Again, becoming an officer or a gentleman. And back in the day, they used to try to say, well, if you had a female officer, well, I'm a female, so this doesn't apply to me. They got rid of that language, so it's just officers now.
I see. But at the same time, this article, as well as the one that you just mentioned, it's pretty much subjective, right?
They're extremely subjective, without a doubt. There's a lot of articles that are subjective. You'll see in the UCMJ, if anyone's just bored and wants to go read through it and is looking for a way to fall asleep, UCMJ, I'm telling you, it'll get you there. But there's a few. You've got one that's provoking speeches and gestures. What's considered provoking? Is flipping the bird a provoking gesture? Or do I need to pull out a knife and hold it menacingly? I don't know. It's subjective. And so you have these different things that are very, very subjective. This one specifically, Article 88, contempt toward officials. It's talking about public officials, specifically elected officials. So, and it lists out a few, president being a big one. And this is to our officer corps. Should not be showing contempt toward the president. Now, there are some limited exceptions, small private conversations, not in uniform, not at work, those different types of things, they can do that. But otherwise, it's a big no-no, especially at work. And if subordinates around, they can't do that. It includes Congress. And I do want to emphasize here that is Congress as a whole. They can show contempt toward specific elected officials in Congress, but they cannot show contempt against Congress as a whole. Congress sucks. They can't say that.
Yeah, I mean, they pretty much, it's inbred into, inbred, that's not the right word. It's hammered into our culture to just not talk about them in general. And
without a doubt, especially, being in the military and at work. Oh Lord, no. I mean, there's been many times a conversation will pop up at work and I'm like, this is a bar conversation for later. This is not right now. I'm gonna walk away.
Yeah, 100%. Especially the past couple of years, it's definitely been a lot of that. And I mean that's completely understandable.
The viewpoints are.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, it's come to the point where you're getting emails from the Secretary of the Air Force or whomever, saying that like, hey, don't talk about this stuff at work. Don't say any of this because it can create a situation where people can speak out of their term, or, out of their lane. And it's one of those things where I'm just like, oh man, I often find myself just excusing myself from a room entirely just to avoid a conversation. If I can, I mean, I've done it where I'll put on headphones and, I'll go into my work area, my office, whatever it is, and I'll just remove myself from it completely. I'm like, you guys can talk about that all you want or whomever all you want, but, plausible deniability. I don't know anything what was going on in that room over there.
Oh, without a doubt. What I don't know won't hurt me, right?
Yeah, 100%. Will the term "with all due respect" save you?
It will not. Caveat to this article, and then, and I don't want the enlisted to think they get off scot-free and that they can talk bad about the president. They still can't. There's still some AFIs out there that say like, "Hey, this is bad. You can't do it," and so it'll still be a violation of Article 92. So there's still a lot of ways to hold people accountable. Don't worry. You weren't forgotten. It's just Congress when they were writing this, they were more worried about their officers.
Hey, I gotta ask the question because there's some airmen somewhere that is like, we just wondering like, hey, you said this and it says that right there. It's in black and white. So I had to ask that question.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the exchange here on Wingman Wednesday. Just a quick reminder, if you hadn't subscribed to the channel, be sure to do so and like this video. Without further ado, back to the exchange.
No, without a doubt. So yeah, I forgot your question.
So what I was saying about the contemptuous language, that it was more geared towards officers than enlisted. You answered that question.
Talking about with all due respect, if that'll save you. No, it won't. This article, and then you'll see again, I believe it's I think it's the very next one, Article 89, or it could be Article 90, that talks about disrespect towards superiors. And then it talks about, disrespect towards superior officers or superior non-commissioned officers and senior non-commissioned officers. So there's those articles as well in there, and they all include this same provision, which is truth is no defense.
100%. Yep. And that goes back to those first few years of me being humbled over and over and over. I'm just like, yo, you don't have enough stripes to talk like that. Yeah, you're older. Yeah. There was my first flight, the LT, the flight commander, my supervisor, who is the NCOIC, and me were all the same age. So it was one of those weird situations where you're just like, well, I mean, fortunately, we were an awesome team. We all got along great. It was a fantastic team. And that was my first flight, being part of the real Air Force. And I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better team. But it was just one of those situations where, especially like I said, for older airmen coming in, it's just like, yo, you need to check yourself real quick, because there are airmen, 18, 19-year-olds that are going to know more about the Air Force life than you. So, definitely you need to check yourself and learn to just, hopefully, if life hasn't taught you by this point, being older, that sometimes you just need to shut the fuck up, then, I mean, you need to.
Well, and so that's one of the things I love about the fact that Congress decided to add "truth is no defense" to it, because that it's like warning labels on cups, right? Caution, this may be hot. Caution, don't eat this battery. Whatever the case may be. I mean, someone did it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just imagining in my head that someone is getting court-martialed for saying something bad about their supervisor. Maybe my commander is an asshat. Okay, sure. You shouldn't say that. That's bad. And then, well, hold on, it's true. And then had a parade of people to testify that that individual was an asshat. That's what I imagine happening, and I find that fantastic. But so Congress came back and said, "Nah, truth is not a defense. You still can't say that type of stuff."
I've heard of a situation like that where, a senior leader, was doing something that
To be clear, I don't think my commander's an asshat.
No, I'm sure they're not. I mean, they got a lot to do with you as it is, so I'm sure they're amazing people. I know I was in their shoes at one point in time, and I was, I don't know what I'm gonna do with this guy. That's a complete lie. You were always on point. That was one of my favorite things. I remember a conversation that I was having with the other dorm chief, where he was asking me, he's just like, "Hey man, how do your guys and how does the flight get along so well?" Because I mean, listening, especially when we went to Beast Week and we were listening to the stories from the other flights. One of the things was that I was grateful for is that our flight came together very quickly, and we were able to talk to each other. Yeah, did we have some static along the way? Yeah, we had some static here and there, but whenever I talked to that other dorm chief, I was just like, "Hey man, it's just my guys. The guys that I have around me, my element leaders, all the people with the position, and everybody, helps each other out." And like I said, when I was telling you offline, one of those things is like whenever you meet people, you can tell that they're going to do big, great things really, really fast. You were definitely one of those cats. And I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. I'm telling you the truth, but truth is no defense. I'll tell you you're an asshat anytime. But one of the punishments that goes along with that, I mean, what kind of punishment can you get for something that's so subjective? I guess, yeah, I get it. It's proving it, but
Yeah, proving it. But I mean, if someone said it and someone heard it, or it gets to that public official, specifically talking about Article 88, it gets back to that individual and they're passionate about it, especially, it's going to depend. One, it's going to depend on who you said it about and who found out about it, right? I mean, if it's just your supervisor, it may just be a quick talking to of, "Hey, don't do that again."
mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, I had plenty of those talks coming up. I'm sure you did as well. I think you've mentioned that a couple times.
Yep, I definitely did.
But if it's something more severe, say you're saying bad things about the president, and for whatever, maybe you're doing a special detail and the president actually finds out, that's going to be a big no-no.
Oh yeah, that's definitely true.
I mean, your career's done at that point.
I can't imagine being in that situation.
So it can range from verbal counseling to getting court-martialed. I mean, honestly,
yeah,
going to jail for a little while.
Yeah, that's definitely like one of those situations where you're talking mess about a specific person, and then that person walks into the room right in the middle of your sentence. It's the same thing. You're caught red-handed, man. Yeah. So you're just gonna have to bite whatever comes down the way. So Article 104, fraudulent enlistment. Now this one I've heard of a few cases of it happening, and I mean what it was that was fraudulent for those people vary greatly, but I mean, I even mentioned it in the video. It's one of those things that you probably hear. This is one of the articles that you hear probably the most violated, at least from what I've gathered, just being out in the Air Force. How many times do you guys encounter something like this?
I mean, we do encounter it. The difficult part, at least, used to be, and this is prior to January of last year, was proving that it was the member's fault. A lot of times they would say, well, my recruiter told me that I needed to say X on my enlistment documents, or that I needed to not tell anybody that I had asthma, whatever the case may be. And those are all grounds, that potentially a member would not have been allowed to enlist. Don't tell them about this arrest. Don't tell them about X, whatever it may have been. And those were all different grounds, but they always had a nice scapegoat of, well, my recruiter told me not to. Now, there's a discharge basis for fraudulent enlistment, and so we can just kick them out as well, just simple as that, and not do any sort of punishment. But in 2019, Congress decided to add a few new articles, one being 104A. They moved 104 to 104A, and that's where the member specifically said, hey, they lied directly.
Yeah, I was looking into it, and I did see that. There was 104 and then 104A underneath it. I didn't go any further into it, but.
So that's a recent addition. The reason they did that is so that way they could honestly hold recruiters accountable for being less than forthcoming with assisting these individuals. Because in the past it was, hey, I have the scapegoat. My recruiter told me to do it. And who knows, maybe the recruiter's retired by that point. I mean, you've got some techs and masters out there recruiting people. They're not too worried about it. And the recruiting corps itself isn't going to start hammering down on those people. So, well, how do we address this? And so they created a specific article to charge and hold those individuals accountable for assisting individuals in fraudulently enlisting. And it's not just recruiters either. It could be if there's a military medical individual who did your medical evaluation and they're a uniform wearing person, they could be held accountable for not being honest about your diagnoses.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard those stories where those recruiter horror stories for whatever reason. And yeah, I mean, are there recruiters that are not the ideal recruiter? Yes. Are there recruits out there that are not the ideal recruits? Yes. So the fact that they separated it into two and being able to hold those people accountable individually I think it's a really good thing. I didn't know that they separated it that way specifically for that reason.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it seems like the individual that came in that enlisted with, inaccurate or misrepresenting information or fraudulent enlistment, they just get kicked out, like you mentioned. And, whenever it goes down to the recruiter, then, what's that like?
We haven't gotten too many of those cases. Typically, first off, they're not allowed to be a recruiter anymore if they're still recruiting. The Air Force Recruiting Service normally takes them out of those billets. Yanks them out of there. I mean, that's a position of trust, and we can't have individuals who aren't playing by the rules there, because that's already supposed to be a stringent process to even get those jobs, those developmental special duties, right? Beyond that, I mean, Article 15s normally, I'm not aware of anyone being court-martialed for it. It doesn't mean that happened, but I'm not aware of it rising to that level.
I see.
And going back to the airmen who maybe misrepresented something, a lot of time, they're just kicked out. But if it's something that's waivable, that they work around, their recruiter just maybe they didn't know, or whatever the case may have been, or the member just didn't know and was scared. If they're a good troop and they're doing really well, because a lot of times these things, they come to light when they're in like technical training. I mean, so the Air Force has already invested a good bit of money into them. If they're doing well, a lot of times they'll process a waiver for them. So they may get a quick slap on the wrist and a quick talking to about integrity. And then they can continue on with their career in that capacity.
Well, I love that that's a thing, because, I mean, usually, like, whenever I went through the Tech P schoolhouse and I ended up getting eliminated from it, like, I met a lot of really stellar airmen that just had all their eggs in one basket, just like I did. And, I mean, it was really good to see them put into another position, where they have the potential and the opportunity to flourish in a different environment that they originally anticipated. And then you did have those people that just, like, no, this is the only thing I wanted to do. I'm ready to get out. But the people that really wanted to stay in, that had, reasons to stay in, if they're still given the opportunity to do that, that's actually a really great thing to hear.
Yeah, there's definitely ways to do that. And if a member wants to stay and they're doing good work, I mean, we've invested money and we want to keep them there. And it's difficult to call it. I hate to use the word fair, right? Because life isn't fair.
That's very true. That's very true.
Unfortunately. And and sometimes the Air Force isn't. We may not feel it's fair, but to ask a 17-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old to answer all these questions and to make the perfect adult decisions, that's a very high expectation, and that a lot of these kids they're going to miss the mark, right? I mean, they're joining. Some of them, yeah, definitely. We have a large majority of our military who join because they that's all they've ever wanted to do. They have a family heritage. They have just a strong desire to serve. Others, it's because they didn't have any other choices. They didn't have any other options. That was the best option available to them. I mean, that's a lot of our core, I think. I mean, for me, that's what it was. It was my best option at the time, and I did it, and I'm happy with it. But I mean, those guys, they're terrified of not getting in. They're terrified of it, of that last, what they view as the last door being closed in their face. So I mean, they may be a little less, less than honest about how much pot they smoked, or how many speeding tickets they have, or they got arrested this one time for shoplifting.
That's definitely true. I don't necessarily hear a lot of that static on the Air Force side. I have heard a lot of that static coming from other recruiting offices where, these potential type of cases are more prevalent over there. It's nothing to knock them over there, but one thing that I did notice between all the different recruiting offices is, the Air Force wasn't going out of its way to get you. You know, it was one of those things just like, hey, if you qualify here, this is where you want to be. The Army and the Marines, God bless them, they'll give you a Camaro to join the military if they could. The Air Force is like, this is your job. This is what you get. This is the day you're going out. Take it or leave it, man.
Yeah.
So
it's goes for the best branch, though. I mean, that's just how it works.
It is. I've gotten the pleasure of working in a tri-service environment at this assignment. So I'm with Navy and Army, and just noticing the difference between all the cultures, it's definitely eye-opening, to say the least. And one of the things is, because I was looking at being an MSC, and that's my officer counterpart. So it's almost my exact job on a broad scale, but just on the officer side. And for the Air Force, they have a time and service cutoff, which I already broke that. But the other branches don't have a time and service cutoff. So they're just like, hey, you can just come join over here. I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm good in this shade of blue right here. The shade of blue is very good.
I like my per diem in my nice hotels.
That's what I told them too. They're like, I see y'all sleeping out there in tents. I'm not about that. I'm good. That's what I do in my leisure.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the exchange here on Wingman Wednesday. Just a quick reminder, if you hadn't subscribed to the channel, be sure to do so and like this video. Without further ado, back to the exchange.
I'm too old for that. My back doesn't like it. I'm good. I like my life. I don't know. I'm spoiled.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, bro. So the last article that we're going to be talking about is Article 112, which is being drunk on duty, correct? So, yeah, this is probably the one that I've heard the most about. I'm not going to lie. Like, it just, man, especially being in Korea, I felt like I heard this one like all the time in Korea. Or overseas, you hear about it a lot. The overseas cultures, at least the ones that I've been to, that they enjoy their alcohol a lot more. It's definitely, part of their culture. So how many times do you, I know you probably encountered this one a lot, or at least heard of it a lot.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I've got one client who I still feel bad for, who got strung up on this and a multitude of other things. But yeah,
it all, and in the end, it boils down to just bad decisions. Sometimes it's just one bad decision, and Lord knows that, whenever I was a civilian and in college, I mean, I made a slew of bad decisions too. But just seeing someone's career, just their livelihood and everything that they wanted, get so impacted by a bad decision. I mean, you said it earlier, life isn't fair, but you also said earlier, it's just like, hey, you're doing wrong. That's just what it comes down to.
Yeah, I always like to tell my the airmen that I'm training that if they have to ask if this is okay, it's probably not. let's start at that baseline. I don't want to be that guy, but let's start there. Don't get your hopes up.
That's a good starting baseline. Just like,
It is.
okay, you tell me where your common sense lines up with this. Do you think it's a good idea if you need to ask that question? Like, just so I was reading into it, and like being drunk on duty obviously means that you'd be blowing into the machine, and it would give you the legal amount that if you exceed that. If you're a little hungover, uh, I don't imagine it's a thing, but if you're legally drunk, I know you're gonna say something. I know you nipping at it already. I just, what are the extent of drunk and hungover?
So unfortunately, there is no nice line, right? There's no like this is where it falls off at. But so 112, it's broken down into a couple different ways. The first, of course, is drunk on duty, and that one's pretty obvious, right? Like you're no kidding, drunk as a skunk at work. You can't do your job. That's not good. A shot at the end of the day on Friday to celebrate someone's, having a baby or a promotion. That's a different. Having a beer at lunch, provided I'd say below 7%. I like my heavy beers, but I'd say
that's not a beer. It's flavored lemonade.
That is exactly what it is. It's delicious too. I'm more of a stout guy myself, but
there you go.
But that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about literally, like you're talking about with the blowing into the machine. Sure, they'll do that just as extra evidence. There is no BAC. There's no blood alcohol content cutoff specifically for being drunk. The way it's kind of defined in the UCMJ, drunk is a state of intoxication by alcohol that is sufficient to impair the rational and full exercise of mental and physical faculties.
Okay, yeah, that also sounds subjective to me as well.
It's extremely subjective. And then you're talking about hungover, right? So there's within 112, you've got drunk on duty, but then you've got this nice little catch-all. It's called incapacitation for duty from drunkenness or drug use.
Mm-hmm. Like I know for my FSC and a variety of other ones that they to kind of alleviate that question mark. They're just like, okay, you just can't drink this many hours before your duty day, and that's how they kind of just catch all of it.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Like, do people follow that rule? I mean, you'll find out once you get into the real Air Force, but it's one of those things. You're just like, okay, well, again, the rules, and that those are the rules.
Yeah, those are yeah, that's the thing, right? And violating that, you may find yourself on the hook for drunk on duty or even just a dereliction of duty. There's that Article 92, that little bit of you can throw so many things in it, and that's why you see it on so many LORs when there's probably something more specific that could capture it, but it's easy enough. It captures it. We're good. We're pressing. We wouldn't do that in court, but for an LOR, yeah, fine, whatever. We don't care.
I gotcha. And like I see this one. This is the one that I hear about where just like, okay, yeah, he's gonna go to jail for so long. And I know that you and I talked offline where it's just like, this isn't DWI or DUI. It's close to that one, but it definitely has the biggest impact with getting out of the military, having jail time, having your pay taken, having your grade taken, stuff like that.
It can definitely have a large impact without a doubt. And when we're talking about incapacitation to perform your duties, that can be hungover. If you're lucky enough to have a private office and you come in hungover and you've got to turn off your lights and close your door, I'm sorry, you're not able to perform your duties that day. You're not firing at all cylinders, and someone could very well say, hey, you're incapacitated and string you up for that. And they'd have a strong argument, regardless of how the member was feeling or what their job requirements were that day. And then drunk on duty, the most egregious one again is that client who I feel a certain kind of way. She was without a doubt an addict. She had, she wound up going to court martial, not for this specifically. She got an Article 15. She received non-punishment for the drunk on duty. She wound up being court-martialed for drug use. She was using a few different drugs, and she wound up going to jail. And we would go see her to work on her case. And honestly, in jail, that was her off drugs, fantastic human being. I mean, she just every time she got out, just went right back to him, and it was sad to see. It was sad to watch, and it wasn't a whole lot that I could do to stop that. But her drunk on duty, so she was a security forces member, and they were doing their firing qualification. So they were at the firing range. She's drunk as a skunk at the firing range.
Ouch. Yeah, that's a hard no in all ways looking at it.
Strung up pretty hard for that one. That was not a good life choice, to say the least.
Dang, man, that's I'm at a loss for words for that one. That doesn't happen very often, though, where I'm just like.
She had also shown up for morning formation and fell down because she couldn't stand up straight.
Wow.
So there were two instances there, and so that's the obvious, right? Like, yeah, you're drunk on duty. That ain't gonna fly. But the other, it's a gray area. It's very subjective.
Like, I imagine that specific situation where that individual was with the gun range and then showing up for formation. That was at the tail end of already a long list of incidences, I imagine. One thing, just like we were saying earlier, there's that progression. The majority of airmen, NCOs, officers, they want to handle everything at the lowest because they understand, hey, we're all human beings. Hey, we all are held to a very specific standard, and sometimes that standard isn't always met, for whatever reason, because life happens. People go through different situations, stuff like that. So you'll get that progression. And whenever I hear stuff like that, not just from what you mentioned, but also, being out in the real world and in the military, you hear people have these moments in their life where they hit a very low point. That there are a slew of people that try to assist them to not let it get that far. And it is, man, that's heartbreaking to hear. It really is, because I've known a lot of different people from a lot of different branches, both military and civilian, that have had to hit that wall, and man, you just hate seeing it.
Yeah, but there was nothing anyone could say to change them. Unfortunately, I mean, they weren't listening. There wasn't anything to do. Unfortunately, we got her the best deal we could. She was guilty of 10, but yeah, it was rough. Well, we got her a deal to begin with, and then she got in trouble and lost the deal. And so then we had to try to get her a deal a second time. And it was not nearly as good. The wing commander was not nearly as
forgiving. Oh man, if the wing commander is getting involved, man, that's a hard knock. That's for sure.
It was less than great.
I was like, well, man, I love the fact that we've been able to just, chit chat. We were chatting offline before the episode got started, just kind of catching up. And like I said, man, I love seeing where my fellow airmen are at, whenever we met each other to where you're at now. And it's fantastic. I love seeing it. I love being able to communicate and having this method, this format, this media, being able to do that. So you have a lot of stuff going on. I know you do a lot for the JAG school. If they wanted to get in contact with you, maybe interested in some general questions or anything like that regarding that career field, is there an email or anything that they can hit you up at?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll happily give out my Air Force email. That's perfectly fine. So it's donald.googe. It's Googe, Golf, Oscar, Golf, Echo. I always like to say it's Google without the L.
Yep, that's very true. That's very true, man. Well,
mail. But if you're already an Air Force member and you go into global and you just type in Googe, I'm one of, I think, 3 that'll even pop up, and I think I'm the only paralegal, so I'm pretty easy to spot. It has JA right there next to my name.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I tell people all the time. I'm like, I'm literally the only Bruce Gonzalez in the Air Force, so you can just look me up in global, and it's like right there.
Yeah, easy to find. But no, definitely. I mean, if anyone has any questions or looking for extra info, or just want to set up a briefing with your unit even on the UCMJ, we're happy to do that. Or even your base legal office can provide that same support as well. Either one, we're happy to do it.
Awesome. One of the things that I did want to ask, because I know that I was asked this question, cross training for airmen that are already into the military, into the JAG Corps. Do you have any information, anything like that? I imagine that it's a regular thing.
Yeah, so we have slots every year. I want to say normally we have close to 60 slots a year that we take of prior service airmen, individuals who are already in to cross train, and we get them ranging from senior airmen, technical sergeants. We've had a few masters even in our classes learning, which is a lot of fun because they're going to go be a superintendent somewhere. They have no idea how to be a paralegal, but it's a little 3-level running the office. It's fantastic, but we make it work.
That's fantastic, man. That's one of the things that the people don't realize about the military. The cross training capability. You don't join the military and you get a specific job. And if I remember right, this job for you was open general, right?
I was open general, yeah. So at basic, they came around and asked, "Hey, who wants to be a paralegal? We got 9 slots." And I was like, "Sure." So I was like, better than being a cop.
Yeah, I remember there was a good chunk of the guys that were open general. I think the majority of the guys that we had were open general. There was the spec ops guys, the TAC Ps and the spec op guys, and then there was some security forces, and then everybody else was general.
And then we had a couple as well.
Yeah, that's true. Like I look back at those days, man. I'm like, man, we were a good team. Like I look back at those memories quite fondly. There were those situations where we got lit up for whatever variety of reasons. And it was a good time. We definitely embraced the suck. But, like I said, I enjoy catching up with my fellow wingmen and just seeing where they're at and what they're doing, man. And, thanks so much for taking the time. I know you're a very busy man.
Well, I want to add on a little bit real quick in regards to
by all means, go right ahead.
So the cross training, our process, it's a little more involved to cross train to be a paralegal. There is an interview that's involved. So whatever unit you're at, whatever duty station you're at, you'll apply through the legal office. There is really what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to talk to the superintendent of the legal office. They'll do an interview with you. The SJA, the staff judge advocate, normally a lieutenant colonel or full bird, you'll do an interview with them as well. So it's a little more robust, and beyond that, it's just a simple typing test. As long as your ASVAB scores, which are not that high to get into, but the interview is the biggest piece, and then normally there's a 10-day, so two week 10 duty day internship period as well that you'll end up needing to do. And so that's normally the hardest obstacle to overcome, is getting because as you mentioned earlier, doing more with less. Units aren't wanting to let their people go for 2 weeks.
That's true. That's very true right now.
Working that with your supervisor and with your leadership is always an important part. And then beyond just being a paralegal, we just started a new program. We're calling it EFLEP. It's the Enlisted Federal Legal Education Program. If you're a member with a bachelor's degree and you have less than 6 years in, you can apply to this program. You can find out more info on MyPERS. If you can't find it, you got my email, shoot me an email. I'm happy to give you the details. And you can apply to become a JAG.
That's
and the
awesome.
Air Force, if you're accepted, the Air Force will pay for your law school. So you'll go, well, I say separate. I believe you get paid as an O1 while in law school. The Air Force pays for your law school, and then you come back in as a JAG. So it's a great program for any of our super junior airmen. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's a really impressive. I know that the Air Force across the board, they're definitely trying to give a lot of opportunities out to the airmen as much as they can. I know on the medical side, they have that nursing program. They're pushing that out a lot on our end. So that's awesome, man. Wow, that's pretty impressive, and it definitely makes you a little bit jealous being a little bit older and seeing these airmen and being just like, hey, man, they're handing this stuff to you. All you gotta do is ask and go through the process.
Yeah, they just started that program, so I couldn't use it. So I'm using my GI Bill.
Yeah.
And I'm having to do it at night. It's because TA will not pay for a JD, which is the degree to be a lawyer, because it's a Juris Doctorate. TA will not pay for doctorates.
Yeah, that's one of the same situations as I'm encountering. Is I was wanting to get a second bachelor's, but in business management, and that would have
Yeah.
actually, supported me going towards the MSc side. And they told me they're just like, no, they're not gonna pay for a second bachelor's. You need to go get your master's. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. They're just like, okay, well, you also need to do all these extra courses to get spun up to that master's degree, because I have a completely unrelated bachelor's. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. So that's the path that I'm working on right now myself. So it's a lot of extra work, and I get jealous, like just listening to the airmen's briefings and all the opportunities they have. And I'm sure that the older enlisted members and the older Air Force generations, they listen to all the stuff that we have, and they're just like, man, y'all got it easy too. Don't act like you ain't got it easy. And I'm like, yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so many opportunities out there for everyone. I mean, if you're not happy where you're at in the Air Force, there's another spot. Look for it, work towards it, and there are plenty of ways to be happy in the Air Force.
True words never spoken, bro. Well, once again, man, thanks so much for taking the opportunity and taking the time to have this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You taught me a lot, and it's always great catching up, man.
Well, guys, I hope you found that information beneficial. Thanks for stopping by Wingman Wednesdays. And if you're liking this new format that we have for the exchange, be sure to tell us. Let us know what you think and what next topic we should discuss. I'm Bruce WAHA asking you, hey, where's your wingman? Y'all take it easy.